Hey everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar on how to design milestone-based billing with Salesforce and Business Central integration. I'm Connor Evans, VP of Growth here at dbSync. Really excited to bring on Corey Crawford, VP of Technology with IE Construction, and Harsh Berlia, one of our senior business analysts who actually worked on the project for IE Construction. Now, to start, let's go ahead and dive into some of Corey's background. So, Amin, if you wouldn't mind hitting the next slide here. And Corey, if you could walk us through the origin story of IE Construction, how it spun out of a previous large solar company that your team was working for, and just some of the general background on the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So the founders were all working for a larger solar company in 2022, 2023, and they were working in the new construction and commercial portion of that business. And there was an opportunity for them to go ahead and purchase the business, that portion of that business themselves. And obviously they did that. And then included in that purchase was also the Salesforce instance that they had built out for their customer base while they were there. It came over with them into the new organization. So the company has five founders, all incredibly talented in their domains and expertise, and getting all of that, getting that Salesforce instance that was sort of pre-built and sort of set up was kind of a godsend there too as well.
Okay, so that's super interesting. So I know you guys inherited Salesforce, and I believe you were originally using NetSuite, right? And eventually made the decision to switch to Business Central. Can you talk a little bit about what prompted that decision? Why you guys made that switch?
Yeah, NetSuite is a fantastic product if you have the infrastructure to support it. Out of the box, it comes with decent accounting and decent functionality, but to really make it what really any business needs it to be, there's a lot of customization that goes into it. And, generally when you partner with a NetSuite partner, what you're getting is solutions that they've built for other people that they kind of plug and play that get you a lot closer than you were, but there's also additional dev and expense that goes into it in-house to really make it what you need to make it. Business Central comes with a lot closer to what most businesses, especially in construction and solar, need out of the box. And with a good partner, you can really get it to where you need it to be without the extra and added expense and complexity, really, of having that in-house dev team.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so I want to pivot to the dbSync side because I know we came in, I think, towards the tail end of your Business Central integration, or excuse me, implementation. And we were brought in to start helping integrate a lot of the key components of the business. Now, Amin, if you could go to the next slide. And Harsh, I'm wanting to hear from your perspective because I know you were not only the BA on this, you worked on this project pretty intimately. So, how did IE's Salesforce environment differ from some of the more standard CRM setups that you've seen over the years?
Um, yeah, it was a little more tricky with IE, honestly, if you see overall, right? Where generally people integrate it's like one object to another, right? Like, so it's a
Yeah.
one-to-one relationship with the objects overall. So hypothetically, it would be for most of the instances that we work with, it would be like an opportunity on Salesforce, right? To sales invoice maybe or an estimate on the Business Central end. Whereas with IE construction, they had a custom object built on Salesforce named as jobs, right? And for each of those jobs, they had several different project milestones or project actions associated with it. So they were using one standalone entity or a one standalone custom object on Salesforce to integrate with accounts on business and basically customers on Business Central, jobs, project lines, project tasks, and also creating sales invoices out of the same object on Salesforce, right? So you very uniquely designed a lot of Apex that went into their Salesforce instance, just to basically sustain what they're doing on the Business Central side of things overall.
Yeah, and you mentioned something interesting there, the creation of the job object. So I want to ask, what was the purpose of creating the job object instead of using opportunities to drive the process? Because when we're doing a lot of these order to cash integrations, whether it's, Salesforce and NetSuite, Salesforce and QuickBooks for the SMB, or Salesforce and Business Central, typically folks are using that opportunity to drive the integration and track revenue against. So where did the job creation object come from?
We, Salesforce is more than just a CRM for us. It's also our project management platform where we're keeping, all of the milestones and the steps that are in the job, all of the items that are used in the job, locations of where those items are stored, all of the project actions, all that exists inside of the job, and it's, editable and trackable in the job. For project planning purposes, which is why it's a little separate from the opportunity. There's a lot more information in the actual jobs than there are in just the opportunities as well.
That makes sense. And one of the things I think that was really unique that Harsh touched on earlier was the milestone component of this, right? So can you talk a little bit about how billing milestones are defined and why they're so critical for your line of business?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're talking about construction, solar, or, most blue collar work, there's different steps to a job,
Yeah.
and those steps are often, some are billable, some aren't. So the milestones are really the steps in the job that we have that we can bill against, right? So if it's, installation, then that's a billable milestone. If it's the commission of the job, that's a billable milestone. If we're doing the pre-wire for the job, that's a billable milestone. So each, each part of the contract, each mile or each step in the contract that's billable, is what we're adding down as a milestone in Salesforce.
Yeah, and so my understanding is some of these milestones are billable, some of them aren't. It has to do with whether or not there's, billable work tied to that. So I'm guessing that's where the customized Salesforce environment comes into play and some of that Apex coding Harsh touched on, right? Where
100%.
yeah, those triggers set up whether or not this is going to be billable. If it is, what's the amount that's allocated, and then generating that corresponding transaction on the BC side.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. So I want to ask a little bit about once those milestones are completed in Salesforce, Harsh, what are the transactions that are coming over on the Business Central side?
Like you mentioned earlier, I think it's the billable ones, right? Actually, before even I tell you what they create, right, their Salesforce instances are the ones in which you have to click the least amount, like there's the least amount of clicks in order to create a record. It's that apexly coded out there, right? And generally, whatever is billable out there, first it goes ahead and creates a project task, then project lines. Unlike in any other tool out there where, in an accounting tool, what you do is you might have like a project, correct? And your billable lines or your invoices might just not be related to those projects. In Business Central, that's not the case. You can basically create invoices out of each planning line or the project line that you have within the job itself or within the project itself on Business Central. So the jobs first create a project task, project line, and then each of those milestones basically go ahead and create an unposted sales invoice, and those are kind of tracked back to different project lines, which are like multiples of them that they have from a billable and non-billable perspective on the Business Central side of it.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense, and I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about one of the unique aspects of Business Central. So whenever we're doing these Business Central integrations, dimensions always come into play. Corey or Harsh, can you maybe speak a little bit to how dimensions are being used in Business Central and maybe some of the challenges that were initially encountered when we were mapping out the integration with dimensions?
Yeah.
Okay. I
No,
can
I
go.
was going to say, Harsh, go ahead since you're more familiar with the
Uh,
integration challenges there.
Actually, it was my first time working on a Business Central project myself, right? So I was thinking about what dimensions are overall, right? Because it was like it was like a pain for us to like actually map it over. right? But the more you get into the complexities of Business Central, the more you understand how important dimensions are overall, correct? They kind of help you analyze and track um, different stuff. Like in case of IE constructions environment, like warehouse, locations, the type of battery, what type of battery it is at the first place. Is it an inverter or not? Right. So multiple different dimensions that they were actually looking or trying to analyze on the Business Central front for reporting purposes. From an API standpoint, although no, so from the UI standpoint, what happens is you can have multiple different dimensions that you can do on the header and on the line item level, right? But from an API standpoint, those numbers are kind of limited, where you can only do like two or three of them. I think it's three now on the Business Central front on the header level, but on the line item level, you can have as many dimensions as you want to track against a particular line, right, for an invoice overall. So these are some small challenges that people face all the time when it comes to dimensions. But overall, it's kind of very important as a like a think of it like a custom attribute or an inbuilt custom attribute that Business Central has provided you so that you can just track and analyze different things as subcategories overall.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there that was interesting, right? Was the unique aspect of leveraging dimensions for reporting. So, Corey, I wanted to ask you, what value are you getting out of the dimensions objects, and how are you guys leveraging those for your reporting out of Business Central?
Well, there's a lot of value there, especially, when you're talking about how much is in a certain place, right? So if I want to know how much of a specific inverter is it in in a specific warehouse in a certain part of, let's say California, for instance, then, I know that I can report on, we have 40, just as an example, 40 inverters at the Central California location, right? And then drilling down even further, especially since Business Central has the powerful Power BI reporting built into it, I can say I have 40 inverters in Central California that costs a total of $15,000, right?
Yeah.
So I can know how much I have in each location, how much it costs. I can forecast replenishment. I can forecast jobs now at this point. Do we have enough equipment for this job in Central California that's coming out? Um, Really being able to drill down on the dimensions, especially, in reporting is huge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the more granular you can get, the better decision making you can do as a business all around, right? I'm team have as much data as humanly possible.
Exactly.
So, what was it like from your perspective, Corey, of stepping into this midstream? Because we've gotten to know you over the past year or so, but when we kicked off the project, I know you hadn't joined IE yet, and honestly, when you came in, it was a godsend because you were able to translate a lot of the more technical details into business language that a lot of the other stakeholders could understand. So, what was that experience like coming in midstream?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words. So it was a challenge, not just for me, stepping in mid integration, but in my previous roles, I come from a background as a DevSecOps engineer, as a security engineer, and then in my last position, I did run the NetSuite and Salesforce team, but I had fantastic managers that did both. And I really never got into the weeds of the Salesforce and NetSuite side. I was very much, strategy focused. So coming over here, I had to get up to speed really quickly on, basic administration of Salesforce, basic administration of Business Central, which I had never worked for up until that point. So there was that learning curve there, and then obviously understanding what IE needs and what their business needs are, and how dbSync kind of fits into all of it and makes everything run. It was a lot to digest and really get caught up on, but when you have a middleware that handles the integration, which is honestly one of the most difficult parts, when you have a middleware that's so solid and a team that can really handle that without a whole lot of issue popping up throughout the process, that really helps. And obviously we had a fantastic Salesforce team at that time as well that really helped me get a handle on what we were doing and was really able to kind of run with the ball a little bit without a whole lot of overhead help from me until I got caught up to speed. That was huge as well. Business Central's been kind of a different beast. We've had a few different partners there trying to kind of find the right fit. But I think we're at the point now where that's starting to run smoothly. It's really cool to see Harsh kind of get up to speed on Business Central as well and be able to step in and say, hey, this is why the integration's broken, because I know Business Central so well. I know that this field has too many characters and in Salesforce, so it's not going to be able to go into Business Central, and really he really sees a lot of that before it becomes an issue. So really appreciate you guys on that front as well. But it was definitely a challenge, but I think we're humming along now.
Love hearing that. So if you could do it differently, and let's say hypothetically you step into one of these projects tomorrow from the inception, what would you have done differently from day one, or what might you anticipate as challenges you could mitigate by handling things a little bit differently?
It's hard to say I would do things differently, because the situation that IE was in when this was being built out was you had Jennifer Heisey, who was really kind of leading the project, who's way more technical than she should be, than she has any right to be, right? It's really cool, but she's the vice president of operations. She had a very heavy workload on top of trying to build this out. JD Tofflin, our CEO, was also heavily involved. But he's the CEO, right? Trying to build a business. And Kenny King, Kenny Kingsley, he's our CRO, who is also very hands-on, very knowledgeable about Salesforce, but he's trying to sell and get us revenue. So it I guess what I would have done differently is I would have stepped in as somebody who just has it full-time ownership, right? And
Yeah.
is really able to connect the two silos, or the three silos, really, when you think about dbSync. But the three siloed teams, you have your Salesforce team, the dbSync team, and the Business Central team. Um, that are all working on their specific portion of the project. But I think that one of the things that was missing was a lot of like group meetings and really coming up with it together. And as Harsh said, it was his first time doing Business Central. Our Salesforce team at the time wasn't really super knowledgeable on Business Central. Our Business Central team wasn't super knowledgeable on Salesforce. So I think, really just having somebody that understands the architecture of it all, and, how to manage IT, because when you're talking about IT project management, it's very different than most project management, especially the ones that, our team was used to in the past. When it came to construction, it's a whole different beast. So really just trying to eliminate those silos as best I can is probably what I would have done differently.
Yeah, I can't agree more with that statement, because a lot of the times we'll be brought into these projects, whether it's through a partner on the ERP side. So again, could be Business Central, could be NetSuite, could be whatever accounting software, or we'll be brought in by a partner on the CRM side, right? And they might know Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or HubSpot really well, but they have no idea how some of these accounting softwares operate, and they don't have a direct line to the team that implemented them, or that's servicing them actively,
Mhm.
right? And there's always little customizations that come into play that you need to be aware about, in order to make this go efficiently and quickly. And having everyone on the same call, getting on the same page, and I think having a stakeholder who can drive the project internally is a huge plus anytime we're setting out to do one of these projects.
Yeah, 100%. It's challenging for newer companies, right? Because the IT spend is hard to justify, and you know the MSP is a much better deal, and honestly is probably the right decision in those regards. But having somebody that can really bridge that gap on the team, or at least contracting somebody that can bridge that gap on the team, is a real big difference maker.
Totally agree. So were there any surprises, good or bad, about either maintaining or expanding the integration that you've noticed?
I mean, there's hiccups anytime you're expanding integrations, right? You're going to have APIs that break. You're going to have unexpected behaviors in the system. I wouldn't say there's been anything that was overwhelmingly negative, right? Or even anything that was overwhelmingly positive, right? We got to the point where the integrations were doing what they were expecting, what we were expecting them to do. Little trips and falls along the way, but I guess the biggest joy throughout the process and the biggest relief to me has been how quickly, if an integration breaks or something or a problem happened along the way, is how quickly the team just jumped in. The team at dbSync just jumped in and was able to really fix the problem. Very little delay in the resolution of any issues that we had, and generally we're able to identify the root cause of the problem very quickly as well, which is huge.
Yeah, I love hearing that. For us, we're big believers in having detailed logs, being able to make it easily accessible to get in there, troubleshoot, find what an issue is, and get to a root cause. And then responsiveness in general is a core tenet of kind of who we are and how we operate. So I love when I hear that from anyone we work with. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about what the future of your integration and roadmap looks like. Just get a feel for what some of the current priorities are when it comes to automation and scaling. And these don't have to be integration specific. You can talk more about the business roadmap, but just curious if there's anything that you have in mind for what comes next for IE.
Yeah, we're a very people heavy organization, as any service organization is. We have a lot of installers. We have a decent amount of project managers that manage the projects that we have for the installers, and a whole lot of operations back end. And one of the things that we'll never be able to not scale is our installer crew, right? Like
Yeah.
if there's jobs to install, we're going to need more people. And obviously, as people come, then it's an increased head count. What we want to be able to do, and what our biggest goal is right now, and what my biggest priority is over the next 3 years, is to really be able to, while we scale, obviously I can't do anything about the installer scaling, but I can help prevent a massive increase in overhead in the back end, right? The project managers, the operations managers, the accounting team, the IT team, whatever it might be. So we're really focusing on making sure that our processes are as people light as possible, that there's as many automations in place as there possibly can be,
Yeah.
and increasing the ones that, increasing automation in a lot of the tasks that our people are having to do right now, because we know that, if they're stretched thin now, then it's just going to get worse as we scale up. So things like intelligent document processing, which we spoke about in the past, to be able to like read plans and tell us how many arrays are on a project, what equipment is needed on the project, what the address is for the project, right? Being able to just automatically do that and fill that into Salesforce allows the project managers to focus more on the projects than the data entry, and allows us to scale without having to add more of them, right? So, it's not about obviously eliminating jobs that are already there, but it's about making sure that we don't have to add a whole bunch of those back end jobs as we grow.
Yeah, we're in the same boat, right? Where as you scale, there's only two ways to really address things. It's either process or people, and those need to get refined, right?
Yep.
So if you continue adding people in, you have to add more people in to manage those people. You have to add more HR staff in. You have to add more accounting staff in. Unless you set up those processes perfectly with scalability and automation top of mind, you're going to end up in a mess where your top line revenue might be scaling, but your expenses are scaling, at the same rate, and it creates a nightmare. So I am 100% in the same boat as you, and that's kind of how we're approaching things internally too. But you said something pretty interesting there as well on the IDP front. So for the folks that don't know, we've been working on this internally for quite some time. We've actually just rolled it out in beta, and it's going to be going live into production very soon here. And Corey, what you saw was a very rudimentary version of what we had. We now have it to where you can process documents internally in dbSync. You can drop them into an FTP folder. We can read them, we can digest the information, and you can map that over into any target system, whether that's your ERP, your CRM, a database, you name it. I'm most excited about this product for like the next year. I think it's really a huge turning point in automation and just a value add for anyone who is dealing with invoices, PDFs, expenses on a regular basis.
Yeah, that sounds really exciting. I would love to see what it looks like today.
Yeah,
And
no, we'll set up a call for this next week because we
awesome.
just pushed it out, and I'm going to be telling everyone about this for the next year.
I bet, and it just makes sense for the middleware company and the company that handles your integrations as well as your data retention to get into that space. So I think that's a great opportunity for you guys. That's exciting.
Definitely. No, and I want to pivot a little bit more too, and talk about why it makes sense to have some broader conversations with folks like you who have so much experience doing so many different things in your career cycle so far. One of the projects you mentioned to me that I'm really excited to learn about is Verillion. And Amin, if you could go to the next slide. Now, I know that you mentioned that this is a fractional CIO, CISO venture to me. What inspired you to take this path? Why did you decide to do this?
So it was a couple of different reasons. One of the biggest drivers was that I looked at the way that CIO and CISO companies were handling the business and really providing value to their customers. And what I realized was they were coming in, they'll do an assessment on your current state. They'll tell you what you need to be to get to where you want to be, right? Or what you need to do to get to where you want to be. So if you have a compliance regulation that you fall under, whether it's SOC 2, CMMC, ISO 27001, HIPAA, whatever it may be, they'll come in, they'll see where you're at today. They'll write you a checklist on a PDF, right? And then they'll hand it to you or they'll hand it to your IT team or your MSP and they'll say, here you go. We'll see you next year when you want to pay us another $20,000 to do another review, right?
Yeah.
There's very little ownership of the outcome there. There's not a lot of you know, the there's not a lot of follow through on their part, and it leaves a very confusing gap for MSPs and IT teams who, if they're not used to these regulatory compliance issues or what it takes to get compliant, or they're not very well versed in security. And a lot of people think a lot of people think that IT people know security and security people know IT, and that's just not the case. They're
Yeah,
very different
one and the same.
disciplines. They are very different disciplines. So what I wanted to do was, the market right now, we're all aware of the layoffs at Microsoft and all of these major companies, and it's affecting a lot of mid-sized companies as well. And I have a lot of friends who unfortunately had found themselves out of work. So I saw an opportunity to really provide value to customers and organizations while helping my friends who are out of work, make an impact and make money and take care of their families. So I built Brilliant with the idea that I can run it from a strategy standpoint, still have full focus on my IE duties, and make sure that when we're embedding with we're embedding with the executive teams. We want to know what the strategy is. We want to take the time to understand the business processes. We want to know, we're not just going to give you a compliance checklist. We're going to find out if you actually even need to check that box, if you even, if that particular box or that particular regulation even applies to your business, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then we're going to help you, and we're going to stay on board throughout the whole process until you are compliant. And then we're going to say, all right, what does next year look like? What does the next 3 years look like, right? We are an embedded executive. A lot of these companies don't need a full-time CISO. They don't need a full-time CIO. They definitely don't need the $250,000 per year salary spend, but they need help from a strategic standpoint. They need help mapping technology to business processes. They need help making sure that, they're not buying software after software. And then, 2 years later, when they're trying to cut costs because the market downturns, they realize that, hey, software one has all of the functionality that software two, three, and four have. We're just not using it, right? Um,
That
so,
makes, yeah, yeah, that
so
makes a
I,
lot of sense.
yeah. So that's really where it came from. It was an idea to make sure that redefining kind of how the CIO and CISO space works. A lot of people are able to get into meaningful work and take care of their families, and then I'm still able to keep my focus on IE. So it's kind of a win-win-win there.
Yeah, and there are so many organizations that I feel like are getting to the point where they should have those roles in place, but maybe the budget's not entirely there. It just doesn't make sense from an expense standpoint on the business, but there's a real need. And that gap is huge if it's left unaddressed, any longer than it currently has been, right?
Well, what I have to say in that regard is, a lot of businesses, and it's a little bit more. You'll notice it a lot more in service industries and stuff like that. But a lot of people see IT as as an expense, as a cost center, which if it's ran incorrectly, it absolutely can be. But when IT is ran correctly, it becomes a force multiplier. It's the thing that allows you to scale without adding headcount. So while you're paying, say $120,000 for an IT manager, there's a good chance that they're saving you 3 or 4 additional hires at 50K a piece. So you're actually coming out net positive 50K, right? In that instance. So, um, I urge anybody listening, please make sure that, you see the value in IT, and you understand that it can really be a force multiplier for you, and a way to end up saving money if you allocate your spend in the right way and you get the right people on board.
Absolutely. And the other component of that, right, is the risk component. What are you leaving yourself liable to as an organization if you don't have the right security architecture in place? So I'm interested to get your opinion on this. What do you think is one of the biggest overlooked risks in IT strategy or architecture that companies should be paying attention to in today's world?
Yeah, so I'll answer that question, but one of the things that I really want to touch on, because I think it's kind of missed in a lot of places and by a lot of people, is that a lot of companies are out there and they're like, we're not a huge company, we're not going to be actively targeted by hackers. We make $20 million a year. They're going to go after the Walmarts or the Lowe's or whatever major company of the world, right?
Yeah.
And something to consider for especially service industries that have larger customers is your seen as the weaker link, right? So hackers and attackers expect you not to spend as much money on infrastructure. So they expect you to be a way to get to those larger customers. So they'll breach you trying to breach them, right?
Wow.
Um, something to consider. As far as what to do to eliminate your risk, there's a big push right now from companies like Microsoft and Okta and those companies to really get rid of passwords, to go to what's called a FIDO2 standard, which is fingerprint and facial verification for identity without having a password. So you have an authenticator app, you scan your fingerprint, it's going to give you access to that site. More importantly, when you get phishing emails, like that fingerprint, that authentication is tied to that website. So there's no way for you to go in and enter your credentials on a fake website and give attackers access. It eliminates phishing, essentially, is what it does, which is the largest method of attacking businesses right now.
Yeah, it sounds so counterintuitive when you first say, "Oh yeah, let's get rid of passwords." But honestly, it makes so much sense because you have a unique. I mean, same kind of thing when we're talking about integrations, right? You have a unique identifier that carries with you everywhere you go, and that can be your face, it can be your thumbprint. So
Exactly.
these applications know it's you, it's secure, and no one has any vulnerabilities that could be exposed.
Exactly. And I realize that it's scary. I'm struggling to really come up with a way to implement this with IE, because we're a blue collar shop. We have a lot of people that aren't super technical, right?
Yeah.
So I'm still working out a way to push it out for us, but it's the future. It's coming. I think passwords are going to be a thing of the past over the next 5 years. So I'd really start thinking about ways to implement this sooner than later.
I love that. That's super unique, and I don't think I'd get that answer from anyone else if I asked. At least not in my world and day to day. But yeah, I want to switch back to some common questions around the integration side of things while we've got you here and while we've got Harsh here. So these are some common scenarios, things that people think about when they're coming to us and going, hey, you know, we've got Salesforce, we've got Business Central. Can you do X, Y, Z? So Harsh, what types of data can be synced between these disparate systems?
A short answer would be anything and everything, if you see in a way. But if you see in a micro perspective, right, like there's few things that you always need to make sure when you're syncing between these two systems, correct? Especially when it comes to an ERP system out there. With Salesforce, you are able to query records from any entity out there, correct? But with Business Central, you would not want to create any AP or AR side of transactions, right, as a posted entry, correct? Because unlike in any other ERP tool where you have the options of deleting these records, Business Central does not allow you to. You always have to create reverse transactions against those AR or AP invoices, or that you have generated within that platform. So technically, you are able to sync anything and everything, but there are always limitations that you have from an API front. Like a small limitation is like on the dimension side of it, right? Um, Another one would be not to create a posted sales invoice directly, rather create everything unposted and then post it once you review those out. But yep, that would be something to always consider. But you can almost sync everything between those entities, like CRM and ERP tools.
Corey, I saw you kind of laughing there. I want to know, what was that about?
I mean, we learned that the hard way, right?
Yeah. It was
So-
an interesting situation with us where so Corey and I met at like one day at like after office hours, where we were just figuring out as to what happened. And at that point of time, we saw that there are posted sales invoices created against planning lines, which technically should not have been the case. Now you are not able to reverse it easily without having a business central consultant on a call to again kind of help you navigate as to how to go about this. And then finally coming to the conclusion that we'll have to create a credit memo, get a quantity transferred back to a job, then create an unposted sales invoice again, then post it after reviews that everything is associated to each other. So it was like a hectic day.
It was a really long night.
Hey, hopefully it's a lesson you learn one time.
It's difficult. So, Corey, being on the technical front, it's kind of easier for you to convey those, intricacies to someone, right? But someone who just wants things to happen, or you're talking to a non-technical business user front, right? Who's just not very well acquainted with how these APIs work and everything. It kind of will always become a challenge for you to navigate as to how to convey the software limitations across to the other side or to the end users at the very end, correct? But yeah,
yeah, we see that day in and day out, and that just speaks to how necessary it is to communicate in a language that customers, clients, stakeholders understand, so that everyone's on the same page. So Harsh, that being said, can you talk a little bit about historical data? Is that possible to be synced, or?
oh, yeah, that is something I think that comes with every or any implementation that we do across the board for any of our clients, right? Because you do not implement two systems in one go itself. Generally, people have one system that they have been on for a very prolonged period of time, and then now they are introducing something like a CRM on top of it, correct? So that they don't have to funnel all the data within their ERP tool.
Yeah. My
So-
my dream client is someone who comes on board and says, yeah, we're pre-revenue, but we're getting Salesforce, we're getting Business Central, we've got a SQL database, and we just need it all to talk together. It's never going to happen, but I'm holding out hope still.
But historical data is key part of it. We always want people to do it as well, so that there's always a one-to-one relationship with your record, because every record in different systems will have its own unique record identifier that you would need across the board for each and every record that is there on Salesforce or on Business Central or on a database. so that you are all your teams can work in silos, and you're reducing your IT costs overall with licenses and all.
Great. And on the frequency of the data sync, I'll take that up. We can do immediate syncing if webhooks are enabled in the system that we're syncing from. So Salesforce, for example, has webhooks. You can trigger syncs based on those webhooks immediately, or we can do scheduled syncs at any time interval that's desired. Best practice is usually every 10 minutes or so, but you can go higher than that. We have some folks who do daily syncs depending on the business process, some that do it hourly. It really just depends. Now, on the time it takes to implement an integration, I think this is an interesting question because, Harsh, you build our templates out, right? So if someone's using a totally out of the box environment, how long does it take to get them integrated?
I mean, I have seen where we have deployed projects, or I have deployed projects personally in a day.
Yeah.
There have been times I've deployed projects in just 2 hours, right? It just depends on the level of details that you want across the board and how standard is your project. Generally, most of the projects for a Salesforce Business Central, it's always better if you're using a template so that you have predefined notions between both of these. In Salesforce, it's pretty flexible, right? You can create fields pretty easily. Not the case with Business Central. It's kind of limited in that fashion, where you always need to have a AL code written in order to expose a certain field or in order to create a custom field. So people generally do not want to go that route. But yeah, overall, when you see how much time does it takes to implement an integration between those two, it would hardly be a day, maximum to a week, depending upon the challenges that we encounter with your platform.
Yeah, and then the other stipulation I want to throw in there is things like historical data impact it. If you're not using opportunities and are using jobs that are completely built from scratch, uh, and then if as you're doing the implementation, a scope change happens. A lot of the times people will come to us for what they had in their head as the ideal way to do this. And we always recommend based on, what we've seen and best practices. But new ideas come during the implementation. And now we've got a phase 2 or a phase 3, or maybe even a roadmap based on the systems they're introducing. So we really like to be, trusted partners in the sense that our clients can tell us what they're doing on the technology front, what softwares they're looking to get, and how those will interface with what we've already built. So we definitely like to, stay ahead of that. And that kind of touches on the last bullet there, where if you're still on your way to implement, where do you start? Sooner the better, as far as having the conversations, getting perspectives, getting the teams that are appropriate for each system to talk to each other and have a conversation with whoever you're talking to on the integration front. Super critical to do. I think it's never early enough. I saw I skipped one there as well. Will this integration help with reporting? And Corey, I'm going to ask you. I mean, you've got the integration.
I mean, yeah, it really depends on what you're trying to report on, right?
Yeah.
But in our case, like if I wanted to get a specific data set and I wanted it to be super easy to build, then being able to push information to Business Central and run it in Power BI natively is amazing. Being able to display it on the screen in Business Central via Power BI is a huge bonus. You can do the same. I mean, you can run Power BI with Salesforce as well. It's just not natively integrated like it is, Microsoft to Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it absolutely can help with reporting. It helps with visibility. You can set your Power BI reports on a dashboard inside of Business Central. So as soon as you click there, your dashboard's there. You can open it up and run through. Natively importing data from Business Central into Power BI is just a couple of button clicks. It's very simplistic. So yeah, absolutely it can.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. But the other one that I think is critical for folks to understand too is, typically your Salesforce team, the folks that are working in Salesforce day in and day out, should not be messing around with Business Central too much, right? You want to keep them siloed. And having that data that can sync bidirectionally so that you can see the payments coming in on the Salesforce side, and having the reporting capabilities that are native in Salesforce, you can also build out those dashboards. You can also build out those reports so that you don't have your sales staff bugging the crap out of your accounting team on a daily basis, wondering, what's the status on this account? Has this invoice been paid? So yeah, I think it not only helps, enrich reporting that you ultimately want to do on a high level in Business Central and Power BI, but also gives additional visibility to folks that aren't even touching that world.
Very true.
Awesome. Well, I think we covered quite a bit. I see we've come up on the 45-minute mark. I want to take a minute to just say thank you, Corey. Really appreciate you coming on board and doing this. We seriously value you not only as a customer, but I feel like we've developed an awesome friendship over the past year or so. And I love your perspective and hearing things in your point of view. So I really appreciate you doing this with us.
I appreciate it. I think, I really appreciate you guys having me on. I completely agree. I consider you a friend at this point. Hopefully I can get out to Atlanta and
Please.
hang out a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's been a great partnership up to this point between the two companies. I think, I can speak for our entire team when I say we're thrilled with the work that dbSync have been able to do, and we're really excited, looking at the future and figuring out how to further automate our processes and what you guys are coming out with IDP and stuff like that. It's exciting times ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out and schedule a call to show you the latest and greatest there.
Appreciate it. Can't wait.
Definitely. Yeah. So if anyone wants to get in touch with either myself or Corey, you have the information on the slide in front of you right there. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, anything you want, us to go over deeper that was covered on today's call or wasn't. Harsh, also want to thank you for joining. I know, you worked really hard on this project in particular, and you know it in and out better than probably anyone outside of Corey. So I really appreciate you adding that perspective as well.
Yeah.
Connor, I gotta ask. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Harsh. I apologize.
Yeah, go for it. Go ahead.
I gotta ask real quick. I'm looking at these two pictures here. Mine is 12 years old. How old is yours?
Oh, dude, it's got to be like 8 or 9 years old. Yeah.
Okay.
I look like a child. Yeah, it's been a minute. I gotta get a new headshot updated. Awesome. We'll end on a fun note. Thank you guys for joining. Really appreciate your time today, and reach out if you have any questions.
Awesome. Appreciate it, guys.
Awesome.